I think one of gardeners' favorite plants, I know one of mine, certainly is the daylily. It's easy to grow, it is colorful and bright, and I am lucky enough to be here today with two of the best known hybridizers in the country, Mort Morss and David Kirchhoff at Daylily World. We're just outside of Lexington, Kentucky a little ways. Thanks for having us here, guys. I know you moved the nursery here in 2006 from Florida. Tell me just a little bit about making that move and what all was involved.
Well, it had to do with a lot of potting up daylilies in the beginning and digging them to start with. And then David stayed in Florida and I was in Kentucky to receive the plants. We put them on trailers, semi-trailers, stacked 5 layers high.
And how many plants did you move?
Somewhere in the 18,000, 15 to 20,000.
Wow.
We potted up a huge number. And then we put a huge number in garbage bags, some of which sat there for 3 months. And they still, for the most part, survive the move.
Right. Well, with 18,000 daylilies to see, we better go take a look.
Let's do it.
So this is a beautiful example of a double flowering form of daylily. What causes the doubling, and the petal form in this?
Well, of course, it's genetics, and we have been working to perfect the double form since we began working on doubles in '73. And they've come an awful long way.
Right.
We've widened the outer petals, and then the form that we like best in doubles is what is known as the petaloid form. And petaloids is this row of segments here and here. This is layer 1, layer 2, and layer 3. And these is simply where you have petaloid tissue growing off the stamen.
The stamen of the plant, and you can actually see the stamen on this petal. It's there.
Correct. The pollen did not open on this anther because we had rain last night.
Right.
So they're kind of beat up. I'm very proud of that. I like it, and I will name it eventually.
Beautiful flower.
Thank you. Troy, you know how much people are wild about these spiders and unusual forms.
Right.
A spider, they now have an official definition for, it is when the petal width to length ratio is at least 4 to 1.
Okay, so the petal would have to be then 4 inches long and not wider than an inch, basically,
I think that's correct.
In order to be considered a spider form. And there are a number of those spider forms and or unusual forms.
Here's an unusual form, and it is that because of the curls on these sepals. That
the highly curled sepals. Some other forms with very narrow petals.
Yes.
And then obviously this kind of red and yellow bicolor, that orangey red with the nice bright yellowy green throat that has that spidery form to it.
It meets the criteria, yes. This particular seedling of Mort Morss's is showing a lot of blue or slate, lavender in this eye zone here. And it has a wonderful little edge to it. And he's pursued blue, the color, the elusive blue. And this is possibly close to as blue as we've seen. Troy, see this red here? As I told you earlier, red is one of my passions. I've been breeding red since I began.
Right.
One of the goals was color fastness, brighter colors, things that open out even on a dreadful morning.
Right.
And this is one that we're evaluating and may name, give it a name. And I have taken the pollen from one of those over there, that bitone. I don't like the plant habit of that bitone, but I do like this flower.
Right.
So I would never put something with an undesirable trait and try to duplicate that. So we just simply remove the anther from down there and just rake it across the tip, and we have now pollinated the flower.
Right. So what happens then is the pollen is on the end of the pistil there, and it actually travels down, and the seed pod forms down kind of at the base of the flower.
That's correct. It takes about a half an hour for the pollen to grow down into the ovaries, as it were, the little seeds that are down there. And then, of course, it'll take about 6 weeks, maybe 5 to 6 weeks, for the seed pod to mature. And we gather the pods when they're ripe, put them in little Dixie cups, and empty the seed out of that.
Right.
And when we have enough, we put them into coin envelopes, the seed, write the name of the two parents on the top of the coin envelope. And that way we know what it is.
What the cross is.
What the cross is. And we then put those envelopes into airtight sealed containers in the refrigerator for at least 3 weeks. And that sort of evens out dormancy and evergreen quality so that you get fairly uniform germination at about the same time.
When you plant the seeds.
Correct. We plant them about an inch to an inch and a half, inch and 3/4 deep. And we plant about a week after Thanksgiving here in Kentucky.
Right.
And they don't come up until spring.
Until spring. So they sit in the ground dormant through the winter, the little seeds.
Right.
And then they'll sprout when the warm weather arrives in April.
Yeah, probably maybe March. And of course, each one is different. Each seed produces a distinctly different.
Right. Each one is unique.
Yes.
So when you're selecting parents for your crosses that you make, these beautiful doubles that you have, for instance, what are kind of the criteria that you look for in a good parent to pass those genetics on to, hopefully, to the offspring?
We try to take as much into consideration as we possibly can. Strong, vigorous, hardy, daylilies that resist every bug and fungus that may fly in from
who knows where.
Yes. And what we are illustrating here are the flowers of 3 different plants that we want to orchestrate into seed.
Right.
This particular one crossed onto this, we would hope would help this thing to open up, and because it's in the same color range, actually they were in the same pod. So this is crossing 2 sister seedlings together.
So this one has kind of trouble opening its flower, but it has a really nice strong scape.
Yes, and it also has all this white
on the edges.
On the edges.
Okay.
And notice also it opens early ahead of time, and so you can get water spotting, which is why the whole thing is the color of this.
Right.
So this is uniform. It has a nice little, what we call a watermark there on the petals and on the petaloids. So that's why we would use this. And the reason why we wouldn't use this was some of the other nice reds that we have. Many of those reds are of the red double line
are short,
about this tall right here, just above the leaves.
Right.
So we want to get that quality, the scape height and quality onto that
really nice flower.
Yes, and so the pollen from this one onto there is a cross. Now this one, it just lays out nicely. And sometimes they say that pink will clarify other colors, so it might help give some color clarity.
Right.
Also has a nice little watermark there, if you can see that.
So again, this flower may help this one open nicer.
Yes.
Will probably be in kind of the same color range, and we'll hope that that stem gets nice and tall and gets the flower up above the foliage.
Well, this one has a nice stem too, so I would have high expectations.
Yes. So what we have here are some really nice examples of eye patterns in daylilies.
Right.
Tell me a little bit about some of these varieties that are here.
Well, this sort of brownish one is from a gentleman in Mississippi's hybridizing program, and it is a diploid, meaning it has 22 chromosomes.
Right.
It is, as I said, it's a miniature, well branched. This one often will win the queen of the show by virtue of all the branching and bud count and those very unusually marked flowers. This is basically plain and a diploid miniature.
Okay. So then over next to it, we have this beautiful kind of creamy yellow with a very dramatic eye and edge.
Yes, this daylily was introduced into commerce in 2007. In 2007, it was the leading edge in what you would consider an eyed and edge daylily pattern.
Right.
Shipwreck Cove is the name of that one. Here we have from the same hybridizer, one that came out a year later in 2008. It is known as Fabulous Black Pearl, and it of course has the big eye, wide edge, wide double edge.
Sure, and even I see some sharp little teeth on this one. The other thing that really is happening in daylilies is this fabulous patterning in some of the eyes.
Right.
And here you have an example of that.
There are different shades of color here. It's a which is why we call it a patterned eye, because of all the different play of colors within the eye.
Yeah, and sometimes it can be so dramatic that it almost looks broken or striped to some extent.
Webbing that is a different color, all kinds of different patterns. And one of the goals is to bring that pattern all the way out to the edge with other patterns within the pattern, rippling out to the edge. So Coffee to Go is 22 chromosomes and a diploid. And through genetic manipulation with diploids, we have created something called a tetraploid, which has 44 chromosomes. And when you're crossing, you get a few million more possibilities, quite a few million more than you do with diploids. The two you cannot cross together, just simply because you won't get any germination.
It's not all just about a pretty face. Certainly we want a pretty bloom at the top of the stem, but we also want nice branching, sturdy stalk, hopefully up above the foliage.
We surely do.
Nice healthy foliage, disease resistance.
Vigor in the vigorous plants. You don't want to wait 10 years for it to establish in your garden.
Right.
So all of these are things we take into account. And this particular one, this is the first scape, but if you notice there's rebloom coming on this plant. So here in our zone 6, we have rebloom on cultivars, especially when there's plenty of water.
Right, and rebloom scapes coming up when really the first flower has just opened on.
We call that instant rebloom. Yes.
So we almost have taken the modern daylily, today's daylily, in a direction of some of the popular landscape plants like Stella d'Oro and Happy Returns and some of those, where on these big, showy, beautiful flowers, we're now getting really good, consistent rebloom.
Correct.
Where 20 years ago, you had a main flush of bloom maybe, and then some rebloom a little later in the season, some didn't, and now we're getting more consistency.
Right. And of course, we moved here from Florida partially to establish our lines so that we can leave behind something other than tropical daylilies.
Right. We haven't really talked about this yet, but daylilies come basically in 3 forms: those that go completely dormant for the winter, those that are completely evergreen and keep their foliage up, and then some that are what they call semi-evergreen and in between.
Correct.
And those evergreen plants are kind of the Florida plants that you were referring to.
Yes, but the thing we have to remember also, are they hardy? Do they perform? Do they establish in whatever climate they're in, that you're trying to grow them in? And some of the evergreens will go all the way into Minnesota and be successful, but that's not a common occurrence.
Right.
Because the more dormant and northern bred the genetics are,
Right.
the less hardy it's going to be in Florida.
Exactly.
And the reverse.
And I think that makes sense when you think about it. I mean, it's just kind of common sense that the evergreen things further north, where their foliage stays up, would probably be less hardy, whereas the things that are the plants that are accustomed to going completely dormant and overwintering underground where it's very cold might not be as successful where it's hot.
True. That's true. They just don't get that cold
That they need.
to put them to sleep.
So I've actually been dabbling in a little bit of daylily hybridizing myself, and here are some beautiful examples of what the future holds.
We're looking at an example of what we call sculpting. Notice that this is not doubling, it's not an extra set of petals, it's actually growing out of the petal. And forgive me for doing this, but this is showing you sculpting, what is called sculpting. And now the dreams are bringing that sculpting and teeth and stuff growing up
Out of the petals?
off the surface of the flower. One example of a break in the configuration of the flower, the shape, the form, as it were, is this style here where the petals rise up, have attractive tissue on the back side, and flare out just at the top.
So it almost looks like a daffodil blossom in a way. Almost has a trumpet like a daffodil blossom.
And this one's called Mother Upduff.
David, Mort, I want to thank both of you for letting us come and see just a tiny little sliver of what you all have here. We really appreciate you letting us visit.
Oh my goodness, it's always a pleasure to share life's work. We've been doing it maybe going on nearly 40 years, I guess. And we enjoy visitors to the garden, especially if they call ahead of time. And our website is daylilyworld.com. People are welcome to contact us with any questions that they may have.
Okay, so you can find out more information about Daylily World and about David's and Mort's daylily hybridizing and plants that they might have for sale on our website at volunteergardener.org.